Welcome to the course Digital Transformation and Technological Innovation. So, we are into our third module, that is transitions in software markets. So, let us continue the discussion that we have had in last few sessions. So, let us start. So, in the last few minutes of the previous session, we were talking about OSS products and the software markets, right. So, we talked about that many OSS products, they have been quite successful, and they have been able to acquire a significant market dominance, right. And some of these have actually become industry standard in their respective categories. So, let us try and understand some of these categories. So, first is web OS category, right. So, little bit of this we talked in the previous session. So, many web OS products, they have actually established, for example, LAMP setup we already are familiar with. We have previously in previous session we have talked about the LAMP setup, and then the new stacks also that have come up. So, we covered that those some of those products. So, all those are actually web OSS products. So, many OSS products, they are already established, and they are able to manage their own self sustaining economy, and they are powering lots of businesses websites, right. So, in addition to what we have already covered in terms of LAMP plus JavaScript based stacks and then the meta frameworks, other products are, for example, WordPress. So, this is a very popular content management system, right, and even including the enterprise segment, in the sense that many firms, they would like to run their own intranet portal for document sharing, knowledge sharing, and other kind of documents manual. For that purpose, they would be running intranet portal, or they might like to use a content management system for similar purposes, right. But in general, if we just look at percentage of the websites that are there on the internet, about 43% of them are actually are CMS and being powered by WordPress. Then add to that other content management systems that are there, and there is a big footprint that we can see for the WordPress and content management system in overall internet that we see today. Next, another one within the web OS category is Nginx. So, Nginx is a very high performance web server and powers a huge portion of world's busiest websites. Now, we have earlier spoken about LAMP, right. So, here we talked about the Apache web server software. So, Nginx actually replaces this A with E, right. So, we get a LAMP setup where E is standing for Nginx, and this is often favored over Apache for its speed and efficiency, right. So, this is another addition to the web OSS category, Nginx, right. Moving on, then we come to enterprise OS category. So, Odoo is actually can be better categorized as enterprise OSS category, because it is about enterprise management, right. So, made few changes from the previous slide that we saw in the previous session. So, enterprise OSS category, Odoo is all in one enterprise management suite. So, we have earlier spoken about enterprise software and ERP and CRM. So, this is an alternative to those commercial offering from companies like SAP, right. So, what is the kind of market it fills in? So, small and medium firms which cannot afford or maybe would like to cut costs in terms of investing into enterprise systems, commercial enterprise offerings, right. So, Odoo is a good alternative, open source alternative for them. So, over 7 million users globally are actually seem to be using Odoo, right. So, this is one example of enterprise OSS category. Now, another one under enterprise OSS category is PostgreSQL. So, that is alternative to Oracle's database products. Now, Oracle is known as big database systems company, right, with lots of offerings catering to different industry segments and all that, right. Now, this one fills the relational database category. So, this is actually an advanced relational database, and there has been massive surge in its market share. Mainly the main feature of this particular product is the robustness, and obviously there are lack of licensing fees. So in comparison to Oracle's database offerings, there is no licensing fee, and then robustness. So essentially it also makes a change in the LAMP tech stack, right. So instead of MySQL, we now have PostgreSQL. So LAMP becomes LAP, so P in the LAP stack. So this is often favored over MySQL for its robustness, right. So therefore this is another example of a OSS product which is having a significant market position, especially in the enterprise segment, right. Now we move to the next category, from web to OSS to enterprise OSS, now to enterprise and cloud OSS. So some of these categories, the products that we are talking about, some of them might be overlapping. So but we have tried to put them best in the appropriate category. So enterprise and cloud OSS category. So what this category is about? So nowadays, because there are so many companies which like to host their software on cloud, or they want to run their apps on cloud. So therefore products under this category, enterprise and cloud category, they are in a way becoming the backbone of modern tech firms. So tech firms, while they would be offering the enterprise category OSS product, they would also like to offer a cloud version of that product, right. So OSS products in this software category becoming the sort of backbone of modern tech firms, right. And they have in a way created a massive commercial ecosystem of support and managed services, because if you are buying some of these enterprise software, then you might need ongoing support as a firm, because it might be complex and there might be upgrades and other things. Then if you want to host, if you want to take advantage of the cloud version of that enterprise software, then hosting would be needed, right. So support services and managed services, right, both kind of services, the whole ecosystem has come up, where most of the firms, they are providing both the options. If you want to install on-prem, you want to install the enterprise system on-prem, that is also there. And if you want to access a cloud hosted software, which is more like a software as a service, that we'll be talking later in coming slides. So both kind of options are there. So essentially forming a big backbone of modern way of doing things. Now let's take few examples here. So in this, first we'll talk about the GitLab. So GitLab, earlier also we touched upon when we were discussing GitHub dominating or hosting most of the open source software projects, and we talked about GitLab as alternative to that. Now this also is, GitLab itself is a leading DevSecOps or DevOps or DevSecOps platform, and it hosts just like GitHub, it also is hosting Git repositories for collaboration, right. And while GitHub is more open in that sense for public OSS projects, GitLab is also focusing on-premise part, where it is having significant market share in on-premise code management. So over 1 lakh organizations are actually deployed GitLab for their enterprise needs, because many companies, they would like to benefit from the GitLab or Git technology and additional tools. So GitLab adds those tools on top of Git, and therefore many organizations, they would like to manage, do the version management and development, the whole development operation. They would like to have a high performing, a leading DevOps platform. So GitLab is filling that gap. While GitHub that we talked about, that was also earlier an open source platform, right, that was also under open source category. Later that got acquired by Microsoft. So GitLab also offers CI/CD and other tools which are needed to make it a development platform or DevOps platform or DevSecOps platform. Sec is standing for the security also, right. While Git in the case of GitLab and also in the GitHub, underlying the core technology that is there that is actually Git. So Git is a distributed version control system for tracking changes in source code. So while companies, the kind of software that they might be developing, they would like to while so many changes might be happening in those software, they would like to they would like to track the changes that are happening and do version control and all that, so that things are much more manageable. They are able to manage stable versions, and they are able to manage the new versions. Some versions might not be so good, might fail in testing and other scenarios, right. So overall, a version control system is needed for most companies which are into software development. So Git provides Git has become sort of a standard technology for version control, and GitLab and GitHub, what they have done, they have provided additional tools to facilitate organization to develop their software, where GitHub is doing that for open source software products. And GitLab is an open source. GitLab is a something that is catering to on premise code, right. So this is another product on the enterprise and cloud OSs category. While I am saying that it is having a significant market share on premise code, but cloud option is also there. Now moving on, next cloud, this one we little bit talked about in the previous session also. So this is another example of enterprise and cloud OSs category, and this is Nextcloud self-hosted platform for sharing, storage and collaboration, right. And as you can see, this is alternative to Google Drive and Dropbox. So day in day out, we are users of Google Drive or Dropbox. Now Nextcloud provides a private and more secure alternative. So what about the companies which cannot use maybe or don't want to use Google Drive or Dropbox for their internal document sharing and collaboration, and they would like to have something that is more private, just like GitLab is filling that gap for companies or firms, right, in case of development operations. Similarly, Nextcloud is filling that gap by providing a self-hosted platform. So companies can run their own private secure alternative to Google Drive or Dropbox, right. Now adoption has surged because firms are seeking privacy and sovereignty, because once you upload your files into Google Drive or Dropbox, so it's like you are sharing your files with the provider company as well. So many companies would be concerned about the privacy and sovereignty issues related to their data. So there is that risk that goes with the companies like Google or Dropbox, which for companies in global south or countries like India are mostly foreign companies. So there can be data sovereignty and other issues. Now moving on, enterprise and cloud OSs category, another very popular product, or sort of it has become industry standard, is Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is an industry standard for managing containerized applications at scale. Nowadays development operations we talked about, and containerized application is way to go. So many applications, they are being produced in a containerized form, and Kubernetes has become industry standard for that process, right. So industry standard for managing containerized applications at scale, and it has seen widespread enterprise adoption. So lots of enterprise are actually adopting Kubernetes, and it is also becoming a common platform for cloud native software. So right, if you directly want to develop a software which from the design, from the start itself is a cloud native, then Kubernetes is the standard or the technology that will facilitate that kind of development. Then Docker is another example. This is a leading tool for containerization. So Kubernetes is more about orchestration of these containerized applications or orchestration of containers, while if you were to create a container, then you would need a tool like Docker. So this is a leading tool for containerization. So while Docker had its own orchestration and all that, but because Kubernetes is winning and has become a standard for container orchestration, right. So therefore Docker has also complied with the Kubernetes standard, but it remains one of the most used tool for containerization itself, right. So allows developers to package apps into portable units. So we talked about the containers. So what are containers? These are portable units, right? And essentially whatever, whenever you are running an application, there are lots of dependencies to run that application. So when you install that application on a system, there are certain other supporting software systems or other software that might be needed, that need to be installed beforehand. Otherwise the software might not work as intended or might not work as at all, right. So there is a lot more learning curve that goes into managing these software which are having quite a significant dependencies. Now containerization process takes away that dependency, where containers pack all the dependencies along with the application itself into a portable unit. So you don't have to worry about dependency, everything will be installed while when you use the container. So it's like a package apps into portable units, right, where the dependencies and other also are taken away, and therefore the cloud native architecture, where the irrespective of the kind of OS that platform is running, irrespective of the kind of hardware that is running, you can actually pick a right container which will match those dependencies, right. You can pick a appropriate container and use that. So generally you don't have to worry about all the installation and handling of dependencies, right. So allows developers to package apps into portable units, and it has becoming sort of default for modern development workflows, right. Though there are new competition in this space, mainly driven by the Kubernetes ecosystem, so which is providing the container orchestration, and as part of that ecosystem other alternatives are available apart from Docker to create container itself, right. Now we move to the next category, that is productivity OSS category. So LibreOffice is there as an OSS product, which is leading Office suite and by being used by millions worldwide, and including some government administrations also. They, instead of using the Microsoft Office suite, many organizations, government and others, they have gone for the open source option, that is LibreOffice. So LibreOffice is a fully featured alternative to Microsoft 365, right. So this is also having an important share in this particular market. Now what are the other productivity OSS category software products? So VLC Media Player is very popular multimedia player globally, right. So it has ability to play nearly any format, so more versatile in comparison to other proprietary media players, right. It's more versatile, and that is the reason for its widespread adoption. So constant community driven updates are there. It's an OSS product, so constant updates are there. So it is continuously improving. If any new format comes, it is more likely to play that format. Then next category is AI OSS category. So here PyTorch and TensorFlow, which are machine learning library frameworks, these are dominant library framework which are actually open source library products or machine learning library products, and they are used for building AI and deep learning models. So particularly they are popular for deep learning models because scikit and other OSS products or OSS library frameworks are already there. PyTorch and TensorFlow are filling the gap for the deep learning models, right. So these are sort of dominating the whole AI software, especially the library part of it. That whole market space is actually covered by these library frameworks. So pretty much any model which is using deep learning in its model, right. So more likely it will be using PyTorch or TensorFlow libraries. Then we come to our few important questions here. For example, open source business model, right. So what is driving the open source business model, right. While we talked about so many open source software products, and especially the ones which are dominating or having significant presence or are a major player in their own categories, so that we talked about. But why they are succeeding? while in compared to the commercial firms and their commercial proprietary offerings. So, let us look at some of these reasons. Some of these reasons little bit we have touched earlier also. So, first we will look at open source impact on IT markets. So, because of the popularity or dominance open source software products, what has happened in the IT markets in general. So, one is you get free computing options, so which lowers the cost of computing. So, cost of computing goes down in general. So, therefore, more people would be, more organizations, firm would be able to afford or take advantage of the computing and the software and everything that goes with it, right. So, lowers the cost of computing. Then affordable alternatives to commercial computing offerings. So, that we have already given examples for, right. So, this also in a way brings down, because you do not have to really worry about or really worry about missing out on the commercial offering, because you are getting affordable high quality alternatives. So, this is especially beneficial for smaller firms. So, smaller firms will not feel left out just because they cannot afford the commercial computing offerings. So, they can go for these affordable alternatives in the form of open source software products. So, reliable and secure computing options, so that also lowers computing cost, because then companies will not have to worry about other security software and security systems, because the open source software itself is quite reliable and secure, and that also brings down the lower cost, because companies budget on cyber security and IT security in general might come down. So, this is also beneficial for them. What are the other impacts? So, if we can look at the productivity gains. So, there are lots of funds and time that can actually be saved because of open source, and those saved funds and time can actually be used for other value creating activities, competitive initiatives or innovation. So, there are lots of productivity gains that are there because a company goes for OSS products. So, they save that fund that they might have ended up paying to a commercial company and for commercial offerings, right. And they will also save time. If they were to develop a software on their own, they might have spent considerable time in that development process. So, whether it is in terms of funds or in terms of time, the companies are able to save both, and therefore, they can use that in other activities, initiatives and innovation in general. So, overall there are productivity gains. So, there are cost goes down here we talked about, and now the gains are also there. Now, how these companies, so we come back to the original question, how has the open source business model succeeded? So, what are the revenue streams for these companies? So, we will look at some of the revenue stream here. So, OSS vendors revenues in IT markets. So, one revenue stream is selling services to provide support and consultancy for OSS products. So, earlier also we talked about that OSS vendor, while the software is free, but it is complex. Any software especially in the enterprise and even in the single user segment, individual segment, software can be complex, and it might be difficult for organizations to use that effectively. So, therefore, or manage that effectively. Therefore, services. So, companies, these OSS vendor, they sell services to provide that support in terms of upgrade, maintenance, other customization support, and they also provide consultancy in terms of how to arrive at the tech stack that is suitable for a business need, and then supporting in that process, right. So, this is one of the major revenue stream, and you can see companies like Red Hat is one of the significant OSS firm. Then you see commercial firm which are into commercial offering, they are also listed here as OSS vendor, because IBM we talked about it also ships Linux, it might also ship Linux as part of its mainframes and other offerings. So, therefore, it will also be providing support for Linux, and then Oracle is also supporting Linux, because many of the Oracle's offerings, they directly compete with Microsoft, right, and therefore, they would like to support Linux and support their products and take away the market from the Microsoft, which will be running, which will prefer to run its own Microsoft Windows server, right. but as we have earlier spoken about that, Microsoft is also coordinating some of the open source activity, and they are also supporting using Linux in many of their servers. Another revenue stream is selling advanced enterprise versions of OSS products. While free versions might be good enough, but if organizations are looking for something more advanced, then these OSS vendor they come up with more secure, more qualitatively better versions of better enterprise products, right. So, for example, MongoDB is doing that. So, there is a community edition from MongoDB and then enterprise edition, right. So, by offering an advanced version, by selling an advanced version, these OSS vendor make money. So, they gain expertise by offering a particular community version for free, then they use that expertise to come up with a more advanced version and sell that, right. So, if we look at the commercial firms like Microsoft and others, so if we see that they are also doing pretty much that, when they apart from their own commercial offering, they are also using the OSS offerings as well. Third revenue stream that we can talk about is selling managed or hosted cloud option for OSS products, because nowadays companies instead of going for their on premise hosting of a software, right, they might go for cloud hosted solution, cloud hosted software. So, some of these companies which are into OSS, they might provide that facility, they might provide access to a software in the form of software as a service, or they might provide hosted cloud options for your versions. So, for example, Docker is doing that, right. So, selling managed or hosted cloud options for OSS products offer mainly their own the OSS products where they are involved in, right. So, these are different revenue streams that OSS vendors actually go for to make money. So, we will like to stop here and we will continue our discussion in the next session.